Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, and buonasera laziali around the world. This is the Bianco Celesti broadcast. I am Sean McIntosh, joined by my Canadian counterpart, Mr. Stephen K. Moore. We are excited with, obviously, our emotions are a little high. We're coming off probably has to be one of the most exhilarating 3 points we've seen in quite some time. Tons of emotions, tons of controversy in the match against Torino, finding all 3 points, which was an absolute must for us. But, the wind in our sails was kind of let loose a little bit today with the news that Lazio is obviously going to be without some key components for the upcoming match against Zenit tomorrow, without the likes of Ciro Immobile, without Lucas Leiva, Strakosha, and again without Luis Alberto, which is pretty heartbreaking news for obviously a club that's been without Champions League football for 13 years. That's our core that essentially got us to this point. So for them to be missing yet another match, it's pretty disheartening. But look, we march forward. We know this team has fight and resiliency, so we'll be excited to see what they can do in this match tomorrow. But we are excited right now and in the moment to learn a little bit more about the club we're going to be facing in Zenit. And we are joined by Hanu, who is a writer and runs the Russian football news account to give us and Laziali around the world the insight, knowledge, the scoop about Zenit and what we can expect in tomorrow's match. Hanu, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries, guys. Thanks a lot for having me on. It's great being a part of your podcast, talking about football, talking about Lazio. I'm interested to learn about your great club as well. So I hope I can help you out and learn a lot on my side as well.
Well, we appreciate it. And look, we know these matches have all been exciting, exhilarating, and we've obviously gotten to a point where things are starting. I don't want to say that they're obviously set in stone, but we're starting to see some things, and we have a couple of games under our belt to start to tell a story. But before we start diving into some of those results and what we've seen, going into this season, what were your expectations for Zenit, both domestically and then certainly in Champions League?
Well, Zenit is arguably one of the biggest clubs in Russia. It's the richest club in Russia for sure. It's owned by Gazprom, which is the world's largest producer of natural gas. So you can understand the expectations and the money that come with the club. And for the past 2 years, actually, it's been winning the Russian league. So it's won the Russian league for 2 years in a row. And we have a manager named Sergei Semak, who's a local legend. He's sort of, like a Zinedine Zidane story, if you will, a player who was very well renowned and then he became a manager. So expectations going into this season were quite high. Winning the league 2 years in a row. The league only had a 2-week break between, the two seasons. So everybody was expecting that Zenit would carry that form into the next season. So winning the league was, and most people predicted that they would win the league. And so domestically, the expectation was to just keep going, build legacy, and go there. Internationally, in the Champions League, it's sort of been tricky for Semak, manager. His detractors have been coming at him. They've said that his performance is good in Russia, but in Europe it's not as good because last season Zenit were, I believe, second in their group, which contained Benfica, Lyon, and Leipzig. And then on the last day, they lost 3-0 to Benfica, ended up finishing bottom. So there have been complaints about his work in Europe. So fans this season were, after the draw, were hoping for a second-placed finish. Of course, Dortmund, the obvious frontrunners in the group. But at the very least, they were expecting a third-placed finish with, Brugge finishing last, and that so far hasn't gone to plan. So his job is under trouble, actually. So this Lazio game will be quite important for both the club's future, the manager's future, and, the season.
Very interesting there. And like you said, we have Simone Inzaghi as our manager, who's also kind of I'd say a club legend, but someone who spent over a decade with the club and then was offered a manager role right out of retirement, and then he's worked his way up to the senior team. So it's kind of something similar on the coaching aspect of it. But like you said, in the Champions League, they failed to impress this season. They lost against Club Brugge and then Borussia Dortmund in both days that, especially from home, we thought I personally thought that they would secure that win, and then they ended up losing 2-1 onto Club Brugge. So what do you think's gone wrong for them, just overall in general in the Champions League so far?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think one reason is that Russian clubs are famously, if you have a look at Russian football news or any other Twitter account which talks about Russian football, there's always a sense of dread and a sense of disappointment around Russian football clubs in Europe. Because every year, we sort of build it up. Oh, this might be the year we, finally get to the knockout stages, and something terrible happens each year. So this season, the main issue with Zenit it's partly been injuries because Malcolm, who is an ex-Barcelona player, he's record transfer. They signed him for 40 million. He's been out. He's not been able to play in the Champions League. That's been one reason. Another reason has been that Zenit are, according to a lot of people, and fairly enough, is they say that Zenit are too one-dimensional when it comes to tactics. Semak doesn't have a backup plan. He's only got one tactic. A 4-4-2 formation, which relies heavily on a target man and a second striker. And that's one of the major reasons that people think that the club is just too one-dimensional to take on a variety of clubs that you find in Europe. Because Bruges had a lot of pace, Dortmund have unbelievable attacking prowess, Lazio have Immobile and a quality team. So just the type of football that's played in Russia is quite different to the one that's played in Europe. So the main issue I would say is that the manager has simply been too much of a one-track pony with his tactics, and he'll be looking to mix it up and hopefully improve the results.
And that's also interesting as well. It sounds like a similar story, Shawn, compared to Lazio as well, with some fans just stating that he's in a 3-5-2 formation. He likes to stay within that formation, the same tactics with a counter style of play. As you mentioned, there's a few injuries there to your team. We saw this morning that Malcolm, Azmoun, Driussi, and Musayev are going to be unavailable for you guys. And then us on our end, whether it be through injuries, whether it be through COVID, we're missing an abundance of key players through the likes of someone like Ciro Immobile, Luis Alberto, Lucas Leiva, our goalkeeper Tomas Strakosha. So it'll be interesting to see how we line up. My question for you next is, how do you think Zenit's going to line up?
Well, sure. I think Zenit they typically always play a 4-4-2 formation. So you've got Mikhail Karzhakov in goal, who's a Russian international goalkeeper. You've then got a guy called Karavayev, who's also another international. He'll play at right back. Then in the centre back positions are probably two players that people might be familiar with. One is of course Dejan Lovren, who just signed from Liverpool this summer. He's sort of been the marshal at the back this season. And the another is a Ukrainian player called Yaroslav Rakitsky. He's some people who hold an interest in Eastern European football. He's also a pretty decent player at the back. He's going to start. And then we have a left back from Brazil named Douglas Santos, who's a modern day fullback, if you will. So that'll be the defense. And then in midfield it's quite interesting because some players have stepped up as of recent. Some players have really fallen off. But one player that I think we can expect for sure to start is Wilmar Barrios, who is arguably the best player in the entire Russian league. He's a player who never stops running, a player who's a typical defensive midfielder, and he plays as a Colombian national team player. It's too important for the side. Then is an interesting choice because Zenit just signed a man called Wendell from Sporting Lisbon for 20 million euros. It was the only major transfer along with Lovren. So you could see either him or Ozloev, who's a similar box-to-box number 8 type of midfielder, start. And then after that, you've got two wingers and two strikers. So the striker, one of them will be Artem Zyuba, that's for sure. He's the captain of the side. He's really come to the forefront of Russian football, a target man, good with his feet. So he's definitely going to start. And then the other three spots are quite contentious because you've got Sardar Azmoun out. He would have been paired alongside Zyuba, so he's out of the equation. Malcolm would have started. He's out of the equation. Sebastian Driussi would have probably started. He's out of the equation. So Semak is faced with a sort of a dilemma here. So he might go with a guy called Mostovoy, who's a 22-year-old. He might play up front. He has the pace that other Zenit players lack. And the other player would probably be Alexander Erokhin, who's recently got called up to the Russian national team. He scored 4 goals in his past 4 games. He stepped up to the plate in the absence of other major players in the team. So we can expect a 4-4-2 with the key players being Lovren, Barrios, Zuba up front, and probably Wendell or Ozdoev, to sort of get involved in the build-up play and get involved in the attacking side of things.
Yeah, Hanu, obviously, we touched on some of the, but still a very strong starting lineup. Who should Lazio and Lazio fans be most concerned about to really key in on this match, on that Zenit roster?
I think the obvious and probably the only answer given the injuries is Artem Zuba. I'm not aware of how good the Lazio defense is at handling really tall, strong target men, but he's Zuba and Azmoun have typically been the strike partnership. So Zuba is like sort of a false line, but not really. He builds up. He gets in with a lot of assists, scores a lot of goals, with the top scorer in the league last season. So if your team isn't adept at handling such tall, strong strikers, then he might be an issue. Otherwise, I think most of Zenit's attacks should be easily handled by your side. You might see a couple of moves from Mostovoy if he starts. He's a quick player. He can get in behind the spaces and cause some havoc. But otherwise, there's not really, because of three major absences, the attack is really depleted.
I think personally Juba is going to be as well the biggest kind of difficulty. We've seen him on the Russian national team. That's where I've seen him most, just causing that havoc in the back. I'm hoping Wesley Hoed actually starts in our back line because I think that he'll be marking him 100% just because of the aggressiveness that he has. But as we saw this past weekend, we concede way too easily, which is something that's going to worry us, especially if you guys have someone who's crossing the ball into the box too, Artem Juba, because right now I think that's our biggest weakness off of set pieces, corners, free kicks, crosses into the box.
And there are moments, right? So our problem is, we have a pretty decent, and especially because Wesley Hood has shown the last couple matches that, he can be a solid enough defender for us. And obviously we've got Acerbi, who is, at this point, one of the best center backs in the league. And Patrick has proven to be quite capable. Our problem isn't that they don't have strengths, because especially defending height and strength, we're talking about Wesley Hood and Acerbi, who are both big guys. The issue with us is that it's always a moment. It's always a lapse. It's always one mistake, one misjudge, especially when we talk about set pieces or, the egregious defending or moment against Torino, where we always tend to just lose our minds for one split second. So we ended up throwing away what tends to be pretty strong defensive performances. And we've seen it even from the likes of Luis Felipe, who will go on to have an incredible match, but then it's one boneheaded play. Obviously, we see that from Patrick. So, I think the big issue is going to be, can we play well enough for all 90 minutes? And if, again, I like to hear that their strength is size, because I think we match up fairly well with that. But, we'll see.
For sure, yeah. Simply agree with that. I think everything that you mentioned there. The next thing that I kind of want to take a look at, though, Hanu, is Zenit's style of play. For someone in most Laziali who don't watch the Premier League, or maybe they do in Europe, or they see some of the players, like the international players on the international level. How does Zenit play? What's their style of play? You mentioned a 4-4-2 formation is generically the one formation that they stick to, but are they a counter-attacking style of team? Do they whip balls into the box? Do they hold back? What's the kind of style of play?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned that Lazio might struggle with set pieces and lapses in concentration, just that one moment. I think it's pretty. We just found out that Zenit and Lazio are quite similar, because that's what Zenit struggle with as well. We'll get into it once we talk about Zenit's problems. But I think if you do struggle with set pieces and things like that, it might be a bit of an issue with you, because what Zenit mostly rely on is for one of the centre backs, because both of them have good ball playing abilities. So a centre back will probably swing in the ball from deep, and it finds its way all the way up to Zuba in the final third. Then he sort of lays it off to whoever's next to him. And then from that, you sort of make a little move, you cross it in, give a low cross, and it basically, every attack starts off from one of the centre backs bringing a long ball forward. And that's basically the core, and that's basically what Zenit's core attacking strategy is, and that's why if you find a way to negate that, then it's quite easy to stifle them offensively. And but if you can't, then some teams in Russia, they don't have the capabilities to deal with such play where there's just constantly long balls are being swung in, especially if you have Malcolm and Driussi, then you've got an extra bit of pace as well. So if you can figure out a way to stop those long balls reaching Zuba, then I think you guys will have a fairly easy game. Otherwise, I think it'll depend on how your defense can handle those balls really.
Yeah, Hanu, look, typically when I ask this next question, the answers have been pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously everybody knows Ciro Immobile, ended up bringing the golden shoe home last year as the top scorer in Europe's big leagues, but we're without him, and we're also without our playmaking force, Luis Alberto. So who from the Lazio side are you going to be most concerned with when we line up against Zenit tomorrow?
Well, I mean, like you said, the Russian football forums have been quite, let's say, chirpy about the fact that Lazio have a lot of key players out, but even you guys can still field quite a formidable lineup. I think people are quite afraid of Milinkovic-Savic, who is obviously a really quality player. I think almost everyone in the world football knows about him. But otherwise, people have been fearful of Vedat Muriqi. Some people are talking about Joaquin Correa. So the general consensus is that Lazio is a beatable team, but Zenit will it's a must-win game for Zenit. Otherwise, their chances are gone dead in the water. But both teams are heavily depleted due to injury and the virus. So, I mean, we're basically hoping that Lazio have a lapse in concentration, like you said, and we can defend well. We can get a couple of chances and just win through that. But who do you think who should we be scared of in the Lazio side apart from Milinkovic-Savic and Muriqi?
Yeah, well, look, Milinkovic-Savic, obviously world class. We saw what he was able to do in a moment against Torino with a brilliant free kick, and he's certainly going to be the engine. I think that Muriqi has to have his coming out party for us. Certainly, I think it's between him and Correa. We've seen Correa be a little bit inconsistent this year. I want to say maybe the most frustrating player for me personally, because he is somebody that can put so much pressure on a defense, and his finishing touch often fails him. We obviously saw a brilliant goal from him early in the match against Club Brugge, which was wonderful to see from him. But all too often, his finishing touch or his finishing pass fails him. So I would say that we need Correa to be brilliant, and then we need Muriqi to step up, because I don't know if it's his lack of fitness. Obviously, he had COVID in the offseason, and he didn't get the training. But we spent a ton of money on him. And I'm always one to be patient with the player. But given the investment and given the point in the season that we are without the likes of Immobile and others, we need him to step up. So for me, I'm interested to see how those two. And if we're going to win, I think we need both of them playing at a very high level. What about you, Steven?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something similar, like you said. I think Sergei Milinkovic-Savic has been one to step up when Lazio needs him. It was good to see Correa against Club Brugge score that one goal and secure the 1 point for us. I think that's he's got the qualities when he's on his game, but it's if he's going to be on his game is the main problem. Sometimes he looks non-existent, like Felipe Caicedo, and maybe that's not because he's not running or he's not touching the ball, but sometimes I just he's playing, and you kind of lose track of him because he just goes under the radar most of the time. But when he's on his game, he's definitely one of the better attackers in the league, I think, in Serie A at least. So I think Milinkovic-Savic definitely has to step up, depending on who starts up top, because right now it's still a toss-up between the three of Caicedo, Muriqi, and Correa.
Whatever. Who would you want to see? Would you want a pairing of Correa and Muriqi, or would you want Caicedo and Correa, or unfathomable Caicedo and Muriqi?
His riding is high off of scoring that last-minute goal. There are rumors coming out of the training ground that it's going to be a Muriqi and Pereira front two, but I don't see that happening. I think it would most likely be the Correa and Caicedo, but once again, Correa's been playing match in, match out every single game for the last little bit due to Chiro Immobile's absence. So they might be looking to rest him and just try to secure the 1 point, which is what I think they're going to do, because Zenit is definitely a hard place to win, and especially when they're going to have fans in the stadium too. I think it's even more hard. And when you're without key players, they're going to have to adjust the lineup to a certain way, which is why there's rumors that Pereira might come in as a second striker. But ultimately, I think we should just run with a Correa Caicedo. They know each other well. Of course, I'd like to see Murici, since we spent so much money on him, kind of line up top. But this is kind of a game where we need 3 points, I think, to kind of be safe in the Champions League and progress. But a point is the more realistic target, and I think we should try to aim for that, because if we try to push too much, I think, like we said, one lapse in concentration, one long ball, one set piece, that could be the game for us, and we come home with nothing. So, well, I guess we'll have to see what happens ultimately, but I'd definitely like to see probably Caicedo and Correa up top.
So you mentioned what you want to see in terms of, or I guess the most realistic result. So Hanu, I'll ask you first. Let's dive into match predictions. Where do you see this one finishing?
It's a tough one, honestly. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I can see it going, any of the three results could happen. But I think you guys will probably, I think it'll either be like a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw, or Lazio will sneak in a close victory, I think 1-0 or 2-1 or something like that.
Well, I've been dead wrong, so I'm going to let you go first, Steven, because if I remember correctly, I predicted Dortmund to absolutely pound us in that first match. Obviously, I was wrong there. Predicted a Lazio victory in our second match. It ended up being a draw. So right now, I'm on the verge of striking out. So I'm going to let you step up to this one before I give my prediction.
Yeah, like I just mentioned, I think especially with key players, I think a draw would be the most realistic result. Something similar to what Hanu said, a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw is most likely the realistic kind of scoreline. But like he said, one set piece, one kind of lack in concentration either way, it could probably end up a 2-1 or a 1-0. If we had our full lineup, I would have definitely said that we'd probably come away with this game, but that's not the case. So I think the 1 point, if we can get that and secure that and come home, I think I'd be more than happy with that. I'll let you get your prediction in before strikeout.
Yeah, so unfortunately for fans of the beautiful game, I do think it's probably going to be a little bit of an ugly match. I think both teams are going to probably spend a lot of time feeling one another out. Certainly Lazio probably understands that they need to pick up the point. So you'll probably see a little bit more cynical style of football, especially without, our playmaker Alberto out there and Cheeto really pushing that momentum forward. And obviously, I think Zenit, this is a match that they have to win. So I think you're either going to get out of them a team that's ultimately super aggressive, or one that is cautious not to lose this one. So I do think it's going to be fairly ugly in the sense that you're not going to see a lot of opportunities. So I'm going to predict a 0-0 draw on both sides.
Very interesting. Playing it safe this time.
Super safe. And look, I just don't feel good about our ability to score a ton of goals, especially seeing that Murici just doesn't. And I'm not even that I'm not or that I'm pessimistic about him. It's just something's not clicking entirely for him. So I just don't see us being able to score. And we know Caicedo without Immobile is such a different player. He just has proven, unfortunately, for the past couple of seasons that when we need goals, he's certainly able to deliver in big moments. But it's oftentimes with Immobile there alongside him. So. We'll see. We're going to need, like I mentioned, we're going to need Correa to really step up. I just don't see the goals coming in. So, hopefully I'm wrong again in a positive sense, but obviously a big one. This is the game that you'll start to see separation from clubs. So obviously massive for both Zenit and Lazio.
For sure. Definitely. But yes.
Hanu, any last thoughts or things you want to kind of throw in before we sign out about this match?
Yeah, sure. Well, they're not necessarily about the match, but I guess since I'm representing Russian football, I thought I'd, plug the league a little bit. So
Absolutely.
if anybody wants to watch the Russian Premier League, it's a really high level league. People have these conceptions about Russia that it's, there's just snow everywhere and there's bears on the pitch and just like that. But we saw in the World Cup, the stadiums are all world class. It's a really high quality league, and you can watch it on YouTube. The Russian Premier League is an official membership scheme, which is like $6 or $7 a month for all the games of the month. Because we're seeing like the Premier League charging £15 a month for their games, and there's lots of high quality players on action. So if anybody wants to, access some extra football, it's very cheap and there's a number of options. And otherwise, I mean, it's just been great having you. I mean, you guys having me on. And anyone, of course, looking for more information on Russian football can follow our account, which I'm sure you'll plug. But
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
all I
Go
have.
ahead. No, what account can they go ahead and find you on?
Yeah, so the Russian football news account is on Twitter at Rus Football News, RUS Football News. And then my own Twitter account, if anybody's interested in that, I have a little podcast of my own on Russian football. It's my own Twitter account is at H4NUU. It's a lot easier to type out than it is to say out loud. But I followed you guys both as well, so hope you can figure that out. But I mean, thanks a lot for having me on.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing this wealth of knowledge for obviously the Laziali that aren't as tuned into the Russian Premier League. So definitely helpful.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, look, again, thank you, Laziali. Thank you for tuning in. Hope this was educational. It certainly was for me. Also, an interesting tidbit to be able to catch the Russian league on YouTube. That's good to know, especially those that kind of want to tune into Zenit and how they're performing before any of our next fixture against them. So, Laziali around the world. Let's hope for the best tomorrow. It's certainly been a roller coaster of a season already. But thank you for tuning in. And as always, sempre Forza Lazio.